days or months until I would figure out what they actually meant. So when these came into my head, I thought, okay, that's a death, but I thought it's got to be a distant relative. So I kind of pushed it back out of my mind. I thought, no concern of mine, it's a distant relative. And I went on cleaning. Well, sometime later, and again, I totally lost track of time for this particular day, which is a good thing, but the phone rang. And I answered the phone, and it was Brad, one of the friends that Christopher went swimming with, and he asked to talk to Craig because he didn't want to tell me the news. And I said, well, Craig's at work. And so Brad tells me that Christopher is underwater and they can't find him. Now, Chad and Corey were within hearing distance, and they'll tell you that I was screaming. I was absolutely screaming. But in my mind, I was reliving those words, and I was thinking, okay, that's what those words meant. So the Lord had me distracted. He had me prepared for that moment, but distracted so that I was screaming, but yet in my mind, I was thinking, wow, I mean, that the Lord would allow me to know, what was happening before it went on. So he distracted me. So the next thing I did was I called Craig, and he'll kind of fill you in on his version.
At the time, I was working over in Council Bluffs, and Ann gave me a call, and I couldn't understand her at all. She was screaming, obviously terrified and scared. And when I finally understood what had happened, I ran out of work. I've never driven 100 miles an hour for that many miles before, but by the grace of God, I got there safely. Ann and I were on the phone the whole time, praying, asking the Lord, our Blessed Mother, for help, and just praying at that time. So I got up to Lenoma Beach pretty quickly. They escorted me in, and a friend of mine, Mike, was there on the beach and waiting for me. And it was to me, it was a horrific scene. I had nightmares about it for many, many, many years. I was trying to get in the water, trying to save him. Crew was out there diving, trying to save him, and it was just a difficult time. But Mike was there, and the Lord was helping, and just kind of kept me at bay. And then they finally found Christopher in the water, and then we were sitting there. And at that point in time, things were kind of settled down and calm. And then Ann showed up on the beach at that point in time.
So my version, I threw Chad and Corey in the car, and we started driving, again, 100 miles an hour as well. I was on the phone with Craig praying, and I was asking him for directions, because I had never been to Lenoma Beach before. So I had no short-term memory. I couldn't remember things from one to the minute, 1 minute to the next, so I didn't really know what he was telling me, so I was just driving in the direction I thought he told me to go. Margot, who was Brad's mom, had gotten to the beach ahead of me, obviously, because I was really late. And she called me, and she was giving me directions. And so I would ask her, literally, the same exact words, Margot, I'm on Highway 31, which way do I go? At that moment, the phone went dead. So she calls me back. I get the same question out, Margot, Highway 31, which way do I go? Again, the phone goes dead. So this happened a third time. I asked the same question, the same point in the conversation, the phone went dead. So I'm driving, with the boys in the car, helplessly lost, when the sheriff calls me and he says, ma'am, I'm gonna hold this line and I'm gonna get you there. So he talks me, the way through the travel, and I get there, and anyway, so when I get to the beach, it's utter chaos at first. I'm trying to park the car, and I have all these reporters in my face, shoving the cameras in my face, saying, how does it feel to know that your son is underwater and they can't find him? And my words are not fit to repeat. But needless to say, later on that night, they said the mother arrived at the beach with her 2 younger sons, and she was too distraught to be on camera. So anyway, I get to the beach, and what I witness is a completely peaceful scene. I see the divers slowly rowing Christopher in the boat. They're coming to the shore. Craig is over there with Mike, which is Brad's dad. So Mike and Margot are with Craig. My boys, Chad and Corey, were taken into the restaurant area, so they were kind of removed from it, but it was a very, very peaceful scene. When they got Christopher to the shore, the divers surrounded us, and they said a prayer, which Craig didn't hear. I think the Lord prevented him from hearing it, but he said, the divers said, we've lost somebody very special today. We've lost him. And so, looking back on it, again, with the theme of God going before us, I don't say those types of words, but when the reporter put their camera in my face and the words came out, it was so that we didn't have to be on the news that night, because me and the boys would have been plastered over all the news stations, because the story was in every newspaper and the news that night. So it kept us from that, but also being lost in the car and not knowing how to get to the beach and having the phone cut out at the same time when it was a crucial time, which way do I go? the horrific scene of their father trying to get into the water and police and everyone holding him back. They didn't see that. They went to the restaurant. I saw a very, very peaceful scene. Okay, back to Craig.
At that point, they escorted us up to the front of the park, and they were going to life flight Christopher. And to me, I was still thinking that there was hope that Christopher was alive. And a beautiful, wonderful man, Father Chuck Swanson. He was a police chaplain. He was the pastor at St. Joseph's in Springfield. God's amazing. He just comes to us where we're at. And this man was a saint, and he took Ann and I and the boys and talked with us, and he drove us to the hospital, and just a calming, peaceful person, and just was just there with us. He just walked with us in our journey, prayed with us in the car as well. So he was. I can't ever thank him enough for the stuff that he did for our family that day. We did meet him recently in the last couple of years again, and got to thank him again in person. He certainly remembered our story, and we got to share that. So, but it's amazing how God can, he's just there. And if you're aware and you're searching for His presence, God is there. So we were blessed to have that day. We got to the hospital, and the boys, I think, and I and other people, some of his friends and some of the other family that were there, I think we still thought that Christopher might be alive, and Ann was she knew because she heard the prayer and she understood more, and she's got a medical background. And then the doctor took Ann and I in the back and explained, in the family, and explained to us that Christopher had passed. And then the shock hit at that point in time. That was one of the saddest moments of our lives, and then we'll let Ann go on from that time.
So Craig and I went into the room to see Christopher, and the first thought that came into my head was a really odd one, and immediately I thought, what am I thinking? What is wrong with me? But I looked at my son, who was laying there, and I thought, you need a haircut. And I thought, what is that? What am I thinking? So put that aside. And then I gave him a kiss, and I told him I'd see him later, but I knew I would see him later. We'll all be together in the end. That was told to me, so I knew it. I'm sure the nurse who was watching us thought, this woman is crazy. We went home, and all kinds of people were at the house. We had all kinds of visitors, bringing their condolences. And one in particular stood out to me. It was the father of one of Christopher's friends, and he came up to me that very night, and he said, why Christopher? I don't get it. Why Christopher? And my answer was, why not Christopher? He was an amazing child. He had a strong faith. 2 months prior, he had just graduated from high school. His grandparents came in town from Florida, and he was so excited to tell them about some Eucharistic miracles that he had heard about. So if anyone was ready, he was ready. He ran the race, he did his job, he did what God wanted him to do, and it was his time, so why not him? Later on that evening, my sisters were trying to keep busy, so they were pulling together pictures, and they wanted to put together a slideshow for Christopher's funeral. And so, they had a whole box of pictures, and they wanted Craig and I to go through it. And so they're handing us pictures one at a time, saying, do you want this one? Do you want this one? So one picture in particular was a picture of Christopher. He was about 18 months in a high chair, and he was eyeing an Easter egg. And this is a picture that had been displayed at our house forever. It just had always been up in one form or another, and so we had always had it out. And so this time, though, they handed me the picture, and there was a fire on it. I immediately said, oh my gosh, Greg, the high chair's on fire. I handed it to him, and he looked at it, and he said, put it down, put it down. So we put it down, we moved on. And so then we kind of fast forward to the next morning. We were kind of good at holding it together. When all four, five of us, I guess, by then, were together, we could hold it together, we could support each other, but individually it was difficult, really difficult, and we would break down. So I remember the next morning in the shower and just hysterically crying, saying, Lord, you can have him, he's yours, but please, you can't give him to me for 18 years and not let me know he's okay. I just need to know he's okay. So I was just literally begging, Lord, you just need to let me know he's okay. So later on, Craig and I are downstairs in Christopher's room, and we're going through clothes, and we're trying to figure out what we're gonna have him buried in his casket. How are we gonna dress him? So Craig picks up a pair of khaki shorts. He decided that, casual would be good, because that's the kind of kid Christopher was. So he picks out khaki shorts, and then he holds up Christopher's favorite baseball jersey. It's an Astros jersey, and he holds it up, and he says to me, is this blue or black? I can't looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I don't know, is it blue or black? Again, an odd conversation. Our child had just passed away and we're worried about the color of a jersey. So again, another odd thing. So then, sometime later that day, I get a call from my sister Kathleen. Now, she's estranged from the family. She lives in Colorado, and at that point, we hadn't seen her in about 10 years. So Christopher was 18, so he was about 8 years old the last time Kathleen had seen Christopher. And she calls me up and she says, I know what happened. I don't want to be calling you, and I have to call you. She says, I know you don't want to hear from me. I don't even want to be calling you at this point, but I have to. She says, I know Christopher has passed away, and I keep seeing him, and he's not going to go away until I call you, so I have to call you. And she says to me, before you say anything, let me describe him to you. So she says, well, he's tall, and he's thin, and he looks like he needs a haircut. He's got like this crew cut that's grown out, so he looks like he needs a haircut. And he's dressed casually. He's wearing khaki shorts, and he's wearing kind of a casual like shirt, but I can't tell whether it's blue or black. And so I was amazed at what she was saying, and she says, I'm just supposed to tell you he's okay. I'm going to keep seeing him until I let you know he's okay. So I'm telling you he's okay, and now I'm hanging up, and I don't have to talk to you anymore. Okay. So I repeat this to Craig, and to me it's a relief. I prayed, Lord, please let me know he's okay. The Lord can do things in odd ways that we never even think of, and he sure did in that respect. Back to Craig.
Now we fast forward a couple of days to the wake, and Christopher, all the prep was there, friends of the family. So we did it up at Mayor Queen, and there was just droves and droves of people coming in. So Ann and I were sitting in the front row, and at one time, we just remembered that there was just a line of priests from prep that were there. They were showing their love and support for Christopher and our family. And there was an older priest, and I saw Ann talking to him, and I was talking to other priests in the line, and he grabs Ann, grabs their arm, and he pulls her in, and he says, you know where he is, don't you, to Ann? And then he continues his conversation with Ann, and I'm over here having other conversations. Then he comes to me, and he says, I've seen him, he's in heaven. I was like, so then it was crowded, and there were so many people there, we didn't have a chance to talk and visit, but the Lord kind of works with Ann and I that way, and maybe with a lot of you in your marriages and your relationships as well. And he wants us to communicate. So I get part of the story, Ann gets part of the story. So we get home that night, and we're laying in bed, and we're talking, and it's like, she tells me what this priest told her, and then I told her what this priest told me, and that's just another example of God and his love for us. We were struggling, and we wanted to know if Christopher was safe. And here, this priest is telling us that, he knows he's safe, and he's in heaven, and he's seen him. So fast forward a little bit, after the funeral's over and weeks down the road, we go back and talk to some of the priests of prep. We were close with some of them, went to the Jesuit residence, and sat with all the priests. We said, this is what happened. And they said, great, awesome. All the priests were there. And they're like, yeah, no such priest. So we really feel that the Lord sent us an angel that night to tell us that our son Christopher was okay. So just another, just a God moment at that point in time. A few days later, the family was still in town, and everybody wanted to hang out together. And so people were over at the house, and it was time to deal with that picture again of Christopher in a burning high chair. So we talked about it. We all admitted that we saw a burning cross on the picture. We were like, well, when did this happen? Well, our daughter, Brooke, she said, I know when it happened. So she said, the boys are always playing ball in the house, and it was kind of on a carousel. We had a picture of each of our 4 children when they were young, and on the back there was another picture of the kids in the current. Like Christopher's, an older senior picture of Christopher, and same with the other kids, of pictures of them current. So she said she was always picking it up and putting it back together. So she said the boys had played ball in the house that day, and she was getting ready to go swimming with her friends. She was cleaning up, and then she was leaving. So she said, I saw all the pictures. Everything looked fine. Looked like it had looked for 18 years before that. And she went off, and then she went and did her thing. When we got home from the hospital that night, she said she walked by. She was going to the kitchen to get some Tylenol or Advil. She had a headache, and she noticed that the picture had changed at that moment. So it changed sometime during that day. Now, we'd know what his reaction to a burning cross would be. And if we had a burning cross sitting on our table for 18 years, we'd have known that we had a burning cross. So here you can see the picture of Christopher, and this is when he's 18 months old, Easter time. We're dyeing Easter eggs, and there's no burning cross on that. And then on the other side, you see a picture with the burning cross. So we look at that as, you know, Easter, resurrection, new life. God would have come to us, you know, right before Christopher was born and said, look, I'm going to give you this beautiful little boy, and you're going to name him Christopher, and he's going to be with you for 18 years. But at the end of 18 years, I'm going to take him home, and what would we do? Well, we certainly would have said yes. We certainly would have, you know, and like we said, we'd have loved him just like we did for 18 years.
So continuing on, sometime later we went to the cemetery because we had to pick out a marker for Christopher's grave. Now, a little bit of background information. Christopher is buried next to his two cousins who had previously passed away. So my brother Jim had two children die. The first one was Joseph. So when Joseph was his oldest at the time, and Joseph was 8, he was on a ski trip at Mount Crescent, and ATV ran him over, so he passed away. And then, I think it was about 13 years later, his second oldest, Jillian, she was 18 at the time. She was away at college, and she got involved in a head-on collision, and she was killed instantly. So he had had two children pass away, and so Christopher was buried next to Joseph and Jillian. So Joseph and Jillian have permanent markers, and at this point, when we're at the cemetery, Christopher had a temporary marker that the cemetery had placed for him. So we were there to pick out a permanent marker. So it was Craig and I and my sisters, and actually Jim's children were with us. His living children were with us because my sister Carol was babysitting them. So we had a whole group at the cemetery. So I'm looking at the markers, the two permanent ones for Joseph and Jillian, and Christopher's temporary one, and I hear in my head, you know, there's a pattern. And so I look and I don't see a pattern, and then I hear look again. And so I look again, and I'm thinking, I'm crazy. I'm talking to myself, you know, I think this is all me. I'm like, no, there's no pattern. And then I hear, you're not trying hard enough, look again. So I look a third time, and it hits me from nowhere. And what it is, it's their dates of death. Now, ignoring the year, but it's the date, the month and the day of death. So Joseph died January 16th. Jillian died October 19th. And Christopher died July 22nd. So those dates of death are 9 months and 3 days apart. And so I was in shock. I spoke this out loud, so everyone heard, including Jim's, you know, children that Carol was babysitting. And again, I'll turn it back to Craig to continue.
We were trying to piece that together and figure out why. You know, what did that mean? So we talked to some of the priests at prep, and with the best thing that they could come up with for us was, you know, new life. So 9 months in the womb and 3 days in the tomb. You know, so we said, okay, so there's 9 months and 3 days. So we kind of accepted it, we kind of didn't, but we figured the Lord would reveal it to us at some point in time.
the only way I can describe as I was kind of staying in line, preparing myself for confession, was just animated by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was stirring me up for some reason. So I got in there, and I had a talk with the priest, our pastor, Father Bob at the time, and what he said is, you need to go to Healing of Families. Now, I had no idea what this was. I thought, okay, I'll look, he's telling me to go, I'm gonna go, but I had no clue what it was. So one thing about Craig and I is that we always did everything together. That was just how we were. He didn't go out with the guys, I didn't go out with the girls. We just always did everything together. So I knew I was gonna go to Healing of Families, and this time I was gonna go with or without him. So I did the research, I kind of set him up. I did the research, I looked it up on the parish website, I had all the information, I made him dinner, he came home, and I didn't tell him that Father Bob had told me in confession. I just said, you know what, Craig, I'm gonna do this program called Healing of Families. And I want you to do it with me, but if you don't do it, I'm gonna do it anyway, which was odd because I had never done that before. So he looked at it and he's like, no, I'm gonna do it with you. Well, it was amazing. It was the answer to our prayers, and it was the beginning of unraveling all of the questions we had. And so what we were taught in Healing of Families is that if there is a pattern in a family, then it's generational. So we had patterns, we had dates of death, we had death by accident, we had death at a young age. It was always the oldest child at the time, 8 or 18. So many patterns. And we didn't know, we didn't understand that there could be a generational thing behind it, or a generational curse behind it. Now, I'm the youngest of 6, and by the time I can remember, both of my grandparents on both sides were gone. So I never have any memories of grandparents. But my siblings will tell you that my grandfather was a Freemason. He was involved in Freemasonry. And so I knew that. And what we learned is that as part of the advancement in degrees, they do take oaths involving their descendants. And so I'm going to quote a scripture right now because for some of you this may sound odd, and I want to show you that there's scriptural backing to it. So it's Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 8 through 9. You shall not make for yourself an idol or likeness of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters beneath the earth. You shall not bow down before them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, bringing punishment for their parents' wickedness on the children of those who hate me, down to the 3rd and 4th generation, but showing love down to the 1000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. So the root of our pattern seemed to be Freemasonry. And I'm going to read it so I don't get this wrong, but this is a reflection I wrote about the whole situation. So I'm going to read it. The death of our son was not a punishment from God, but was allowed through his permissive will. Just as we all suffer the consequences of original sin, even though Adam and Eve committed it, so too can we suffer the consequences of offenses against God, resulting in generational curses. In God's mercy, he allows these things because he can bring good from it. And Craig will talk in a little bit about all of the good that did come from it. But getting back to the class that we were taking, and it was wonderful because, like I said, it was the answer to our prayers, the answer to our questions. But it was a book that we were reading each week, and at the very last chapter of the book, I was reading it, and there was a prayer to the Blessed Mother. So I read this, and then immediately into my head it was, okay, there's Freemasonry in your family, but have you asked Craig about his? So I got up, I was sitting on the couch, I went to the backyard, Craig was mowing the lawn. I said, you need to turn the lawnmower off and we need to talk. And so Craig can kind of take it from there.
So as I sat down and we were talking, and she said, is there any Freemason in your family? And I never heard of one in our family or saw it at all. But the internet sometimes is a good thing, most of the time it's not. But so I did pop open Google. I looked at my grandfather's, on my father's side, obituary. His crowning moment was that he was a leader in the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, a Freemasonry organization. So then we knew that there was also Freemasonry on my side of the family. I'm a little slow, and sometimes grace of God, we didn't have that. And we encourage you as you're going through challenges in your life, because there's struggles in life. It's part of our journey. It's how we grow in our faith, grow in our trust in the Lord. And he never hid himself from us. And you see that in our testimony where people are showing up and patterns are showing up and all these things. The Lord works in different ways. He made us, created us. He knows what makes us tick. He knows what we can do. So be open to what the Lord has for you, and to be aware that he wants to be there with you and walk with you in your pain and your suffering as well as in your happy times. Let's refer back to the verse I read at the beginning, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. We know that all things work for good for those who love God, who were called according to his purpose. So you might be wondering what good came from this, and I would talk a little bit about this. I mentioned earlier, I wasn't